think a great Batman fight, Batman needs to always want to achieve his objective, so he's very single-minded about it.
I think out of all the DC superheroes, Batman is the most interesting to choreograph.
The main thing is his ability to be intelligent about how he approaches it, so it's not a slugfest punch for punch, but there's an intelligence behind every action that he makes. So he's calculating, he pre-plans, so he can take them out as efficiently as possible.
I always tell people that I pretend I'm the 11-year-old kid where I've got my action figures and I've got Darth Vader and I've got Batman, and I try to figure out the coolest way for them to fight. So with Batman, I look at his background because he has studied every single martial arts in the world. At least that's how I approach it. Like, he knows everything. And because of that, it allows me to craft a ballet of fighting that is much more akin to dance. I want Batman to go into this kind of flurry of punches and kicks and knees, and then end it with, arm bar or some kind of, flip that he throws his batarangs.
It's a visceral thing. It's, the fight at 3 o'clock at the end of school is what everybody wants to see.
My pace car is the live-action guys. I want to top that. The people going to see these films, the fans, I want them to feel like my film fits directly with these guys.
If you look back on Batman in cinema, if you go back to the Batman serials, which were the first, iteration of this character in action, it wasn't a dangerous feeling thing. I think that went through the Batman TV series in the 60s. They were more comedic. They were also barroom brawls. They ended up feeling very similar.
When you go back to Super Friends or the old Filmation animated series, Batman's fighting style has run the gamut. They couldn't really hit each other as much, so they relied on a lot of very improbable bat gadgets, like he magically produces inner tubes that he throws over villains like frisbees.
The animation was fairly limited, so you couldn't do anything that was too elaborate or get the choreography to be as interesting as when you got to Batman, the animated series.
Bruce Timm always said that Batman was more of a brawler, more like a fist fighter. We didn't use a lot of martial arts in Batman, the animated series.
When I first started in the industry, comic book fight sequences were really relegated to just punches and kicks, and I think the most fanciest thing that they would do was a roundhouse, like a jumping roundhouse. And it works because it's all about story.
They spent a lot more energy making the character fights distinct, and they were getting a little rougher. I think that with these movies, we're taking the opportunity to really up the stakes.
I asked myself, how would Steven Spielberg shoot this? How would James Cameron shoot this? Or how would Zack Snyder shoot this?
And so that's kind of where we are now. We make these movies to kind of sync up with what's being done in cinema and action movies in general. And so you see a lot more martial arts and things of that nature.
And it's down and dirty, blood is spilled, and it's way different.
When I came around, I loved Black Belt Theater and the Shaw Brothers and all of those kind of highly choreographed fight sequences. And when I was on these animated shows, I kept wanting to do that, but I was always told, no, you can't do that. And I kept trying to push it. And then what happens, a little movie called The Matrix came out. And after that, every script that I got said, Matrix-like fight.
My name is Damon Caro. Among other titles, I was the second-year director, stunt coordinator, fight choreographer on Man of Steel and the upcoming Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Jay's movies, I noticed. It was the first time I really noticed animation, fight scenes specifically, and the action scenes ramp up and went, oh, not only technique-wise, where you see a wide variety of techniques, the same way that I like to employ. And you could see that he really cares and is a student of cinema.
Here in animation, we don't have a fight choreographer. The actual emotional side of a fight sequence is something that has to occur organically. You have to, get into the mindset of what the actor or the character is.
Various arts are employed, martial arts are employed, and then you have to whittle it down. It becomes more of like a statue or a sculpture where you're whittling away the unessential. And you're polishing and again, making sure that you're conveying the way that I saw Batman fight in the comic books.
Bruce is adopting an extreme viewpoint as Batman, but at the same time, Bruce is very aware and I think cautious about I can't just be like the people I'm fighting. I can't put myself completely above the law and above judgment. He doesn't want to become those he fights. He is still a kid who was raised by a doctor and by a humanitarian and believes in life. He was taught that life has value.
Dressing like a bat doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you a target. And using a gun makes you just like them.
If Batman were only a grappler, if he were only someone who just punched and threw people into walls, I think it would make him too much of a thug. I think it would make him too much of someone who's just clearly driven by anger.
That's a central theme you'll see not only in Eastern martial arts, but there are Western martial arts, there are European saber, there are African martial arts, there's French savate, there's really any culture in order to survive throughout history has needed a martial art to stay alive and to defend itself. So it always starts with the physical because that's the realm we're in, but as you're training and the work ethic and the discipline and the whole journey that you're on, it's all to develop the spirit and the mind, because those are the guiding forces that allow the body to do what they do or give the body the permission to do what it does.
I think he does follow, in a sense, the Bushido code of the samurai, which is basically rules of ethics of how to approach a fight, as well as, as a warrior, the ethical kind of consequences and what you need to do as someone who will either defend the weak or attack your opponent and give them that kind of respect. And I believe it's kind of like an early code for superheroes, if you think about it, and I think Batman really kind of embodies that. I have some fans who write me and they tell me that they've actually spotted certain, fighting styles, like, oh, I've seen this, I've seen that, and that's great. As long as it doesn't detract from the story, I'm all for that, because for me, it's all about the authenticity.
Hit the flood!
There are many martial arts styles that lend themselves to more of a defensive style, not an offensive martial art. So you have to employ those elements from those specific arts that he would use to apprehend someone, to disable them without killing them or without, lethal force. It's akin to law enforcement. It has those same sort of parameters for the most part, where if you say you're looking at a military fight style, they have completely different rules. So Batman has to fall under those parameters as similar to law enforcement, yet you can still have amazing choreography and very exciting battles.
One thing that I really enjoyed about the Nolan films was his way of fighting was based on ninjutsu and what he learned at the League of Shadows. And I thought that was kind of cool. That was a really good way of blending, like the fact that Batman blends into the darkness. He disappears, very ninja-like, he's silent. And, he's like the perfect assassin.
There is a grace many times to Batman. He is a samurai or a ninja, and so he has these fighting techniques developed from various disciplines, which are great and cinematic and sort of make him this machine of fighting.
A lot of that stuff is tied to disciplines that require meditation and Zen and all this inner work within someone's self so that they have some semblance of peace. I don't think Bruce Wayne is very good at that.
Batman has a temper.
There's always a moment in a Batman fight where he kind of lets loose on his opponent to subdue him and maybe goes one extra step beyond what he needed to do in order to subdue them. So a leg may get broken or someone may get maimed a little bit, just to remind that person never to do this again.
So there's that sort of yin-yang battle that's going on between him. His soul, his mind that he's always in conflict with and has to control and maintain that and help guide him while he is fighting.
I call you coward! Come out here and face me like a man!
Because Batman is a student of all martial arts, he implements everything. For example, in The Dark Knight Returns, where he's fighting the mutant leader for the first time. I did that sequence myself because I had a very specific vision for that. And if you watch that first fight where he loses, he tries to match the mutant leader pound for pound in a more of a brawler style, mixed martial arts, where he's just punching. It's just a lot of power moves.
That it? You getting tired, old man? Shut up.
Because in that fight with the mutant leader where he ultimately loses, he loses because he's too old. He tries to outmuscle a guy who is younger than him, faster than him, stronger than him, and will do anything to win. And he loses. And then when I did the fight at the end of the movie, where he ultimately defeats the mutant leader, I thought to myself, what style would he use? I used some mixture of different martial arts, but ultimately I established that fight sequence on Jeet Kune Do, which was Bruce Lee, because I'm thinking, how else are you going to defeat the mutant leader than with Bruce Lee's style? If you watch it, there's little subtleties. Like originally in the original fight, when the mutant leader would attack, Batman would kind of dodge it, or he'd try to block it. In the mutant leader fight at the end of that, instead of him dodging or trying to block it, he steps into the punch.